I arrived at work early that morning, as I always did, expecting the familiar quiet of my expansive office. The building was shrouded in the soft glow of dawn, and the usual hum of activity was conspicuously absent. I stepped into my office with a mind preoccupied by strategic plans and market projections, unaware that my day was about to take a dramatic turn. As I unlocked the door, the silence struck me as odd, a silence that seemed to whisper of secrets hidden in the shadows. The air felt charged, almost as if it were holding its breath in anticipation of something unexpected. My footsteps echoed softly on the polished floor, heightening my senses to every subtle detail of the room. A sudden, inexplicable feeling of disquiet gripped me as I noticed a faint, rhythmic sound emanating from a corner of the room. My heart quickened its pace, each beat amplifying the mysterious aura that filled the space. There was an undeniable sense that something was not right, a prelude to an encounter that would challenge everything I believed about my carefully ordered life. I moved cautiously toward my desk, my eyes scanning the room for anything out of place. The morning light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the marble floors. I'd built Westfield Industries from nothing into one of Boston's most prestigious firms, and my office reflected that success, minimalist yet luxurious, with every item precisely where it belonged. Except for that sound. That soft, rhythmic sound that didn't belong. I set my briefcase down, the leather making a dull thud against the desk. My morning routine was sacred: coffee from Bridgewater Cafe down the street, a quick scan of the Wall Street Journal, and then 30 minutes of uninterrupted planning before my assistant, Sarah, arrived with the day's schedule. But something told me this wouldn't be a normal Thursday. The sound grew clearer as I approached the sitting area near the windows. It was breathing soft, steady breathing punctuated by the occasional gentle sigh. I rounded the corner of my desk, my hand instinctively reaching for my phone, though I wasn't sure who I would call. Security? The police? What would I even say? The Cambridge skyline stretched out behind the windows, the Charles River winding its way through the morning mist. I'd chosen this building specifically for this view, a daily reminder of how far I'd come from my humble beginnings in Somerville. Now, at 42, I controlled assets worth billions, made decisions that affected thousands of employees, and yet suddenly felt utterly unprepared for whatever waited for me across the room. I loosened my tie slightly, feeling a tightness in my chest that had nothing to do with my morning run. The sound was coming from behind my conference table, from the cluster of armchairs where I sometimes held informal meetings with my executive team. I moved toward it, footsteps deliberately soft. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding foreign even to my own ears. "Is someone there?" No response, just the continued soft breathing. I reached for the light switch, flooding the room with brightness. That's when I saw a small foot, clad in a pink sock, protruding from behind one of the large leather armchairs. My throat went dry. My building had state-of-the-art security. Key cards, biometric scanners, 24-hour guards. It was practically a fortress. How had anyone, let alone someone with small feet, made it up to the 47th floor and into my private office? I rounded the chair slowly, unsure of what I might find. Every possibility ran through my mind, from the benign to the ominous. Had someone planted a child here as some sort of protest against my company's recent acquisition of a pharmaceutical startup? Was this some elaborate form of corporate espionage? What I saw stopped me in my tracks, dissolving all my theories in an instant. The breathing belonged to a little girl, no more than 6 or 7 years old, curled up fast asleep in my chair. Her dark hair fell across her face, and she clutched a small backpack against her chest like a teddy bear. She wore jeans and a purple sweater that seemed too large for her small frame. I stood frozen, unsure of what to do. In all my years of business, through hostile takeovers and market crashes, through boardroom battles and midnight negotiations, nothing in my experience had prepared me for finding a sleeping child in my office before dawn. I checked my watch, 5:47 a.m. Sarah wouldn't arrive for another hour at least. I was alone with this mysterious intruder, this impossible visitor who had somehow breached every security measure my millions could buy. I thought about calling security but hesitated. There was something vulnerable about the way she slept, something that made me pause. The rational part of my brain screamed that this was potentially dangerous, that I should be removing this unknown entity from my space immediately. But another part, a part one rarely listened to in business, urged caution and compassion. I took a step closer, and as if sensing my presence, the little girl stirred. Her breathing pattern changed, quickening slightly. I held my breath, waiting. What would I say to her? What could explain her presence here? And more importantly, who had brought her and why? I froze in my tracks when my eyes fell upon the source of the sound, a little girl, fast asleep in the plush chair that faced my desk. Her delicate features and peaceful expression stirred a profound sense of vulnerability within me. I stood there, torn between the responsibility of my role as a CEO and the immediate need to protect this unexpected visitor. Her presence in my office was a mystery that defied all logical explanation. I was a billionaire CEO, accustomed to control and precision, yet here was a tiny human being who had somehow found her way into the heart of my empire. I approached her slowly, every step measured with caution, conscious of the silent stories that each of us carried in our own worlds. As I drew closer, I was struck by an overwhelming surge of empathy and concern. This was not a mere trespass, it was an intrusion into my personal sanctuary that resonated with an urgency I could not ignore. The weight of responsibility pressed upon me as I contemplated the safety of this fragile life left unguarded in a world designed for power and profit. "Hello?" I whispered, crouching down to her level. She stirred, her eyelids fluttering open to reveal deep brown eyes that reminded me of autumn in New England. For a moment, she seemed confused, blinking against the morning light streaming through the windows. Then fear flickered across her face as she realized she was with a stranger. "It's okay," I said quickly, keeping my distance. "I'm not going to hurt you. My name is Michael Thornton. This is my office." She sat up straight, clutching her backpack tighter. "Where's Miss Julie?" she asked, her voice small but surprisingly steady. "I don't know any Miss Julie," I replied honestly. "Can you tell me your name?" She hesitated, weighing her options with a seriousness that seemed beyond her years. "Emma," she finally said. "Emma Reyes. Nice to meet you, Emma. How did you get in here?" "Miss Julie brought me. She said to wait here and be very quiet." Emma looked around the office. "She said my daddy would come." My mind raced. Who was this Miss Julie? And who was Emma's father? Could he be one of my employees? Westfield Industries employed over 5,000 people just in this building. "When did Miss Julie leave you here?" I asked, trying to reconstruct the timeline. "Last night. After dinner. We had McDonald's." She paused, then added with the pride of someone sharing an accomplishment, "I had chicken nuggets and apple slices. Last night." That meant Emma had been here alone for at least 10 hours. The cleaning staff must have missed her, hidden as she was in the corner of my office. My security team would have a lot to answer for. "Are you hungry now? Thirsty?" I asked, concern welling up inside me. She nodded cautiously. I moved slowly to the small refrigerator concealed in my office's credenza, pulling out a bottle of water and an apple I'd been saving for my mid-morning snack. I offered them to her, keeping my movements deliberate and non-threatening. Emma took the water eagerly, but eyed the apple with suspicion. "Do you have any Cheerios?" Despite the bizarreness of the situation, I couldn't help but smile. "Not right now, but I can get you some soon." As she drank the water, I tried to make sense of everything. Someone named Julie had deliberately left this child in my office overnight, telling her that her father would come. Was this some kind of message? A threat? Or perhaps a desperate plea for help? "Emma, do you know your daddy's name? Or where he works?" She shook her head. "Mommy said he's an important man in a tall building. She showed me his picture once, but it was old." My stomach tightened. An uncomfortable possibility was taking shape in my mind. "What's your mommy's name?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. "Mommy is mommy," she said with a child's logic. Then, after a moment's consideration, "But Miss Julie calls her Sophia." The name hit me like a physical blow. Sophia. It couldn't be. Sophia Reyes had been my college girlfriend at Harvard. We'd been together for 3 incredible years before our paths diverged. She toward medical school, me toward my MBA. The breakup had been painful but necessary, we'd told ourselves. We'd lost touch completely after graduation. I studied Emma's face more carefully. Those eyes, the shape of her nose, the determined set of her jaw. They were achingly familiar, a perfect blend of Sophia's features and undeniably my own. "Emma, how old are you?" I asked, though I already knew the answer in my heart. 6 3/4, she said proudly, holding up the correct number of fingers. "I'll be 7 in August." I did the math quickly. 7 years ago, I'd been entirely focused on growing Westfield, working 18-hour days, traveling constantly. I hadn't even thought about Sophia in years, or at least, that's what I'd told myself. "Where's your mommy now?" I asked, dreading the answer. Emma's face fell, and she looked down at her hands. "Mommy's in heaven. Miss Julie says she's watching over me like an angel." The room seemed to tilt around me. Sophia was dead? And Emma, this child who was almost certainly my daughter, had been left here, in my office, by this mysterious Julie person. "Emma, when did she go to heaven?" I asked gently. 2 weeks ago, she said. After she got very sick. That's when Miss Julie came to take care of me. My mind raced. 2 weeks ago, I'd been in Tokyo, negotiating a major acquisition. I hadn't checked American news beyond the financial markets. If Sophia had died, I hadn't known. Nobody had contacted me. I reached for my phone, ready to search for Sophia's name, when Emma suddenly reached into her backpack and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "Miss Julie said to give this to my daddy when he finds me," she said, holding it out to me. I took it with trembling fingers, unfolding it carefully. Inside was a note written in neat, unfamiliar handwriting. "Mr. Thornton, Sophia Reyes passed away on March 8th from complications of leukemia. Before she died, she asked me to bring Emma to you. Sophia never told you about your daughter because she didn't want to complicate your life when you were just starting your company. Now Emma has no one else. Please do the right thing. Julie Martinez, Sophia's nurse." At the bottom of the note was a phone number and the address of a hospital in Roxbury. I looked up from the note to find Emma watching me intently, her eyes, my eyes, searching my face for answers. In that moment, everything changed. The quarterly reports, the board meeting scheduled for later that day, the IPO we were preparing to launch, all of it faded to insignificance compared to the small person sitting before me. In that quiet moment, my gaze shifted from the girl's serene face to her wrist, where a small, ornate bracelet glinted softly in the dim light. My breath caught in my throat as I recognized it instantly, the same bracelet I had given to my first love so many years ago. The relic of a past I had long buried resurfaced with an intensity that left me momentarily paralyzed. The bracelet, delicate and exquisite, carried with it an aura of memories and lost time. Each intricate detail, every graceful curve, brought forth vivid recollections of a romance that had shaped the man I had become. It was as if the very object was a conduit, linking my present reality with a chapter of my life filled with both passion and pain. I found myself caught in an internal battle between rational thought and overwhelming sentiment. The discovery of the bracelet on this little girl was both a blessing and a curse, a sign that the past was not as distant as I had believed. I felt an irresistible pull to unravel the mystery behind her appearance and the significance of this timeless token. "That's a beautiful bracelet," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Emma glanced down at her wrist as if she'd forgotten it was there. "Mommy gave it to me before she went to the hospital the last time. She touched the delicate silver chain with its small Celtic knot pendant. She said it was special and I should never take it off." I swallowed hard. I had given that bracelet to Sophia on our 2nd anniversary. During a weekend trip to Rockport, we'd walked along the beach at sunset, and I'd handed her the small blue box from that jewelry store on Newberry Street. The pendant was a Celtic love knot, a symbol of eternity, of lives intertwined. Like us, I'd told her that evening as she'd held it up to the fading light. "May I?" I asked, motioning toward Emma's wrist. She hesitated, then extended her small arm. The bracelet was too big for her. Sophia must have had it adjusted to fit, with extra links added to allow Emma to grow into it. But it was unmistakably the same one. I turned the pendant over gently, knowing what I would find: the tiny engraving on the back, barely visible unless you knew to look for it. MT and SR. Forever. The lump in my throat threatened to choke me. Sophia had kept it all these years, and then given it to our daughter. My mom said it means that love never ends, Emma said, watching my face carefully. Even when people have to say goodbye. I released her wrist gently, fighting to maintain my composure. Your mom was right, I managed. Emma studied me with an intensity that was disconcerting in someone so young. You knew my mommy, didn't you? Yes, I admitted, seeing no point in lying. A long time ago, before you were born. Are you my daddy? The directness of the question caught me off guard. Children had no filter, no sense of social niceties or proper timing. In the business world, I was known for my ability to handle tough questions during press conferences and shareholder meetings, but this simple query from a 6-year-old left me momentarily speechless. I think I might be, I said finally, opting for honesty. But we should probably make sure. She nodded sagely. Miss Julie said you might not know about me. She said Mommy kept me a secret because you were busy making a company. There was no accusation in her tone, just a straightforward recounting of what she'd been told. Yet her words cut deeper than any boardroom betrayal I'd ever experienced. I wish I had known about you, Emma, I said, and meant it. I thought of all the milestones I'd missed: her birth, her first steps, her first words. 6 years of bedtime stories and scraped knees and birthday cakes. 6 years that Sophia had navigated alone, while I'd built my empire, dated models and socialites, and filled the emptiness with work and wealth. Can I see a picture of your mom? I asked. A recent one? Emma reached into her backpack again and pulled out a small photo album with a fabric cover. She flipped through the pages until she found what she was looking for, then handed it to me. The photo showed Sophia in a hospital bed, her once vibrant beauty dimmed by illness. Her hair was gone, her face thin, but her smile, that wide, dazzling smile that had captivated me from our first meeting in Philosophy 101, was unchanged. She had her arm around Emma, who was perched on the edge of the bed. They were both making peace signs at the camera, caught in a moment of genuine happiness despite the grim setting. I stared at the image, trying to reconcile this Sophia with the one I'd known, the passionate pre-med student who debated medical ethics with me until dawn, who dragged me to protest rallies and volunteer weekends, who dreamed of opening a clinic in an underserved neighborhood. Had she accomplished that dream? Had she lived a fulfilling life before illness claimed her? And why hadn't she told me about Emma? I flipped through more pages of the album. There were photos of Emma as a baby, as a toddler taking her first steps, blowing out candles on various birthday cakes. There was Sophia at what appeared to be Emma's kindergarten graduation, looking tired but proud. I recognized Sophia's parents in some photos. They must have died years ago, as Sophia had been their only child. In every picture, Sophia wore the bracelet. Never removed, just as she'd instructed Emma. Your mom was an amazing woman, I said, handing the album back to Emma. One of the smartest, kindest people I've ever known. She was a doctor, Emma said proudly. She fixed kids who were sick. A pediatrician. Of course, that had been her plan all along. I glanced at my watch. It was nearly 6:30 a.m. Soon my building would be coming to life. I needed to figure out what to do next. I couldn't just keep Emma in my office indefinitely, but I also couldn't bear the thought of letting her out of my sight now that I'd found her. I looked down at the note again, at the phone number for this Julie Martinez. I should call her, find out more details. There would be legal matters to address, paperwork to establish paternity officially, although I had no doubt in my mind that Emma was mine. As I reached for my phone, Emma yawned widely, reminding me that she'd spent the night sleeping in a chair. Are you tired? I asked. She nodded. A little. And hungry. How about we get you some breakfast? I know a place nearby that makes great pancakes. Her eyes lit up. With chocolate chips? If that's what you want. I texted Sarah, my assistant, telling her I would be in late and to reschedule my morning meetings. Then I stood up, offering my hand to Emma. "Should I bring my backpack?" she asked. "Yes, bring everything with you." She slipped her small hand into mine, and I felt a sensation I'd never experienced before, an immediate, overwhelming protectiveness. This child, my child, was now my responsibility. Everything would change. My carefully structured life, my independence, my priorities, all would need to be reconsidered. I looked down at the bracelet on her wrist, at the Celtic knot that symbolized eternity. Sophia had kept her promise in her own way. Our love had never truly ended. It had transformed into this small person now holding my hand. And though I felt a profound grief for the loss of Sophia and the years I'd missed with Emma, I also felt something else, a seed of hope, of possibility. Sitting down beside the slumbering child, I allowed my mind to drift back to those halcyon days of youthful romance and fervent dreams. I recalled the laughter we shared and the silent promises made beneath starlit skies, a love that burned brightly but was ultimately consigned to the annals of memory. The bracelet had been a symbol of that fleeting yet profound connection, a token of commitment in a world that often seemed unyielding. As the memory surged forth, I was overwhelmed by the realization that this moment was far more than a mere coincidence. It felt as if fate had conspired to bring me face to face with the remnants of a love that still lingered in my heart. The little girl, innocent and unaware, seemed to embody the potential for new beginnings while simultaneously serving as a portal to my past. The contrast between the mature man I had become and the innocent soul before me was stark and poignant. I questioned how the delicate thread of destiny could weave such disparate elements into a single tapestry of fate. The mingling of hope and melancholy in that instant signaled the start of a journey I had not expected, a journey that would force me to confront the unresolved chapters of my life. "You know what?" I said to Emma as we stepped into the elevator. "I think we should skip the office today. Let's have those pancakes and then figure things out." The relief on her face was immediate. I realized she'd probably been nervous about meeting other people, being thrust into a strange new environment filled with adults in suits. I couldn't blame her. The thought of introducing her to my executive team made me anxious too. How would I explain her? What would I say? "Can we go to your house?" she asked as the elevator descended. My house, the sprawling penthouse in Back Bay that I'd purchased 5 years ago, featured in Boston Magazine's Most Exclusive Homes issue. The place I rarely spent time in, with its immaculate furniture and empty refrigerator. "We'll go there later," I promised. "First, breakfast." I guided her through the quiet lobby, nodding to the security guard who looked curiously at Emma but knew better than to question me. Outside, the morning was crisp, the March air carrying the faint promise of spring. I'd normally have my driver waiting, but today I hailed a taxi, giving the address of Parker's, a diner in Beacon Hill that served the best breakfast in Boston. As we rode, Emma gazed out the window, taking in the city with wide-eyed fascination. "It's so tall," she murmured, looking up at the skyscrapers. "Where did you live with your mom?" I asked. "Jamaica Plain," she replied. "In an apartment above Mommy's clinic. We had a balcony with flowers." Jamaica Plain, a neighborhood I rarely visited, despite it being just a few miles from my office. Sophia had established her practice there, living her dream of serving a community that needed her. Meanwhile, I'd been accumulating wealth and power, moving further and further from the idealism of our college days. At Parker's, we settled into a booth by the window. Emma ordered chocolate chip pancakes with extra whipped cream, and I asked for black coffee and a Western omelet I knew I wouldn't eat. My appetite had vanished, replaced by a gnawing anxiety about what came next. "So," I said after the waitress left, "tell me about yourself, Emma. What do you like to do?" She thought for a moment, her small face scrunched in concentration. "I like reading and drawing. And science. Mommy got me a microscope for Christmas, and we looked at bugs and leaves and stuff." "That sounds fun," I said, trying to imagine Sophia helping her daughter explore the natural world. "What grade are you in?" "First. But I read at a 3rd grade level," she added with pride. "Miss Abbott says I'm advanced." Of course she was. With Sophia's intelligence and, well, mine, Emma was bound to be bright. I felt a surge of pride, quickly followed by sadness for all the milestones I'd missed, her first words, her first steps, her first day of school. What about friends? Do you have a best friend? Zoe, she said immediately. She lives next door to us. We have sleepovers sometimes and make blanket forts. Her face clouded. I didn't get to say goodbye to her. The pancakes arrived, a towering stack drowning in whipped cream and chocolate. Emma's eyes widened, and for a moment, she was just a kid excited about breakfast, not an orphan thrust into a stranger's care. As she ate, I sipped my coffee and thought about Harvard. About meeting Sophia in Philosophy 101, drawn to her fierce intelligence and passionate arguments. About our first date at the Gardner Museum, where she'd known more about the art than the tour guide. About the tiny apartment we'd shared off campus during our junior and senior years, with its leaky faucet and unreliable heat. About the nights we'd stayed up talking about our futures, her medical school plans, my business ideas. We'd been so certain we'd be together forever. So what had happened? The usual things, I supposed. Diverging paths. Different priorities. We'd tried long distance when she went to Johns Hopkins for medical school and I stayed at Harvard for my MBA, but the separation had been harder than we'd anticipated. Or perhaps that was just the excuse. Perhaps the truth was that I'd been consumed by ambition, by the drive to prove myself, to build something that would last. Are you rich? Emma asked suddenly, jolting me from my reverie. I nearly choked on my coffee. What makes you ask that? She shrugged, licking chocolate from her fork. Miss Julie said you were. She said you had your own company and buildings with your name on them. I do okay, I said, uncomfortable discussing my wealth with a child, even my own child. I work hard. Mommy worked hard too, Emma said matter-of-factly. But we didn't have a lot of money. She said that was okay because we had enough, and lots of people don't even have that. I felt a flush of shame. Sophia had clearly maintained her values, her sense of service and perspective. Meanwhile, I'd become exactly the kind of person we'd both disdained in college, driven by profit, measuring success in dollars and acquisitions. Your mom was a very wise person, I said. Emma nodded, then asked in a small voice, do you have any pictures of when you and Mommy were friends? Friends. Such an inadequate word for what Sophia and I had been. But I nodded. Not with me, but at home. I have some old photo albums. I did have photos, tucked away in a storage container in my penthouse's guest room closet. I hadn't looked at them in years, but I'd never been able to throw them away. Now I was grateful for that sentimental weakness. Can we see them later? She asked hopefully. Absolutely. As Emma finished her pancakes, I called Julie Martinez using the number from her note. It rang 4 times before a tired voice answered. Ms. Martinez? This is Michael Thornton. I believe you left a little girl in my office last night. There was a pause, then a sigh of relief. Thank God. Is Emma okay? I've been worried sick, but I didn't know what else to do. She's fine. We're having breakfast. I glanced at Emma, who was now drawing on her placemat with crayons provided by the waitress. I'd like to meet with you today, if possible. There's a lot I need to understand. Of course, Julie said. I get off shift at Boston Children's at 3 p.m. I could meet you after that. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop near the hospital, and I hung up, feeling slightly better having established some contact with the person who'd been caring for Emma since Sophia's death. As I watched Emma draw, a colorful house with 4 stick figures standing outside, I felt a tangle of emotions I couldn't begin to untangle. Grief for Sophia. Anger at having been kept in the dark about my daughter. Fear about my ability to be a parent. And beneath it all, a strange, tentative hope that perhaps this unexpected turn of events might lead me towards something I hadn't realized I was missing. The bracelet on Emma's wrist caught the morning light, the Celtic knot a reminder of promises made and broken, of paths diverged and now, unexpectedly, converged again. Emma, I said gently, how would you feel about coming to live with me? She looked up from her drawing, her eyes, so much like mine, serious and assessing. Would I have my own room? Absolutely. Could I bring my books and my microscope? Of course. She thought for a moment longer, then asked the question that mattered most. Would you take care of me like Mommy did? My heart clenched. How could I possibly live up to Sophia's example? I, who had barely taken care of a houseplant successfully. I would try my very best, I said truthfully. Every single day. Emma nodded, as if that was all she needed to hear. Okay then, she said, and went back to her drawing, adding a sun with a smiling face in the corner of the page. Determined to uncover the mystery behind this surreal encounter, I gently woke the little girl, careful not to startle her. Her sleepy eyes met mine with a mixture of confusion and trust, and I knew that I had to proceed with tenderness and resolve. I began by inquiring softly about how she had come to be in my office, though her responses were little more than murmurs that hinted at a deeper, unspoken narrative. I set aside the rigid boundaries of my professional life and embraced the role of a guardian and seeker of truth. Every detail of the encounter was meticulously noted in my mind as I pieced together the events that led to this bizarre twist of fate. I reached out to those who might hold clues to her presence, determined to trace the origins of the bracelet and the enigmatic connection it represented. Each step of my investigation stirred a range of emotions: curiosity, trepidation, and a sense of profound destiny. I navigated through memories and records, bridging the gap between the present and the past. The quest became not only about solving a mystery, but also about rediscovering parts of myself that I had long neglected in the relentless pursuit of success. After breakfast, I decided to take Emma to my penthouse. I needed to regroup, to think through this situation away from the eyes of colleagues and employees. I called my assistant to clear my schedule for the day, citing a family emergency. The phrase felt strange on my tongue. I hadn't had family to worry about in years. "This is where you live?" Emma asked as we entered the marble-floored lobby of my building on Commonwealth Avenue. The doorman, Reynolds, gave me a curious look but maintained his professional demeanor. "Yes," I replied, guiding her toward the private elevator that would take us directly to the top floor. "It's probably a bit different from your apartment." That was an understatement. As the elevator doors opened directly into my foyer, Emma's eyes widened at the sight of floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Charles River and the Boston skyline beyond. "Whoa," she whispered. "It's like being in the clouds." The penthouse suddenly looked different through her eyes. The minimalist furniture, the abstract art pieces, the spotless surfaces free of any personal touches, it all seemed cold and impersonal. This wasn't a home, it was a showplace, designed to impress business associates and dates. "Let me show you around," I said, leading her through the space. The tour didn't take long. Living room, dining room, kitchen, my bedroom and office, 2 guest rooms that had never hosted guests. "Which room would be mine?" she asked, peering into one of the guest rooms with its untouched white bedspread and empty dresser. "This one," I decided on the spot. "We'll need to get you some furniture, though. And toys and whatever else kids need." Emma nodded thoughtfully. "My bed at home has a purple comforter with stars on it. And I have bookshelves for all my books." "We can get those things," I promised, making mental notes. "But first, I need to make some calls and figure out what happens next." "Why don't you watch TV while I do that?" I gestured toward the massive flat screen in the living room. "Can I draw instead?" "I have my sketch pad in my backpack." "Of course." I set her up at the dining table with her drawing supplies, then retreated to my office, leaving the door ajar so I could see her. My first call was to Evan Patel, my personal attorney. "I need your help with a delicate matter," I said after exchanging pleasantries. "I've just discovered I have a 6-year-old daughter." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "I see," Evan said finally. "And the mother?" "Recently deceased. The child is with me now. I need to understand the legal process for establishing paternity and gaining custody." "This is unexpected," Evan said, and I could hear him shifting into professional mode. "We'll need to file for a paternity test first, though that's straightforward. Then, assuming positive results, petition for legal custody. Given that the mother is deceased and there are presumably no other family members contesting custody, it should be relatively straightforward." "Are there any other relatives involved?" "I don't believe so," I said, realizing how little I knew about Emma's situation. The mother was an only child, and I think her parents are deceased. Good. That simplifies things. I'll start the paperwork today. In the meantime, you should consider temporary arrangements, schooling, childcare, etc. Childcare. School. These were concepts I'd never applied to my own life. My confidence in the boardroom meant nothing here. I was completely out of my depth. Thanks, Evan. Let me know what you need from me. My next call was to Julia Chin, head of HR at Westfield Industries. Julia, I need information on our family leave policies. Family leave? I could hear the surprise in her voice. In 8 years as CEO, I'd never taken more than a weekend off. Yes, I've recently become guardian to a young child. I'll need to take some time away from the office to sort things out. There was a pause. I see. Well, our parental leave policy is quite generous. 6 weeks at full pay, another 6 at half pay. But for executives, it's somewhat flexible. Good. I'll need to work remotely for a while. Set up video conferencing for my essential meetings. Of course, Michael. And congratulations. Thanks, I said, though congratulations didn't seem quite right for the situation. My final call was to Dr. Elizabeth Warner, my primary care physician. I need a recommendation for a pediatrician, I said after explaining the basics of the situation. I'd suggest Dr. Rajiv Mehta at Commonwealth Pediatrics, she replied. He's excellent, and his office is just a few blocks from you. I can call his office if you'd like. Please, I said, grateful for her efficiency. By the time I finished my calls, it was nearly noon. I returned to the dining room to find Emma surrounded by drawings, colorful depictions of people, houses, and fantastical creatures. These are wonderful, I said, examining a particularly detailed dragon. She beamed at the praise. Mommy said I might be an artist someday. Or a scientist. Or both. Both sounds good to me. I checked my watch. We're meeting Miss Julie at 3. In the meantime, is there anything you need? Clothes or toys from your apartment? Emma's face fell. Everything's still at home. Miss Julie said we couldn't go back because the landlord put a lock on the door after Mommy. She trailed off, unable to complete the sentence. Anger flared in me. Who was this landlord who would lock out a grieving child? Do you know the address? She nodded and recited an address on Center Street in Jamaica Plain. I made a note of it, determined to deal with this situation. Miss Julie has some of my clothes at her apartment, Emma added. But not my favorite things. We'll get your things back, I promised. And anything else you need. At 2:30, we left for the coffee shop near Boston Children's Hospital. Emma had grown quieter as the afternoon progressed, and I sensed she was feeling overwhelmed by all the changes. Are you okay? I asked as our taxi navigated through the busy streets. She looked up at me, her brown eyes serious. I miss Mommy. No words seemed adequate in the face of her grief. I know, I said softly. I miss her too. It wasn't until we'd said the words that I realized how true they were. I did miss Sophia, not just now, but for years. I'd buried those feelings beneath work and ambition, but they had never truly disappeared. Julie Martinez was already at the coffee shop when we arrived, a petite woman in scrubs with dark circles under her eyes. She stood when she saw us, relief evident on her face. Emma, she exclaimed, and Emma ran to her, accepting a tight hug. I was so worried about you. I'm okay, Emma said. Mr. Thornton bought me pancakes. Julie looked at me, her expression a mix of wariness and hope. Thank you for taking care of her. Of course, I said, extending my hand. Though I wish we'd met under different circumstances. We settled at a table, Emma between us. I ordered coffee for Julie and me, hot chocolate for Emma. I need to understand everything, I said quietly. About Sophia's illness, about Emma, about what happens next. Julie nodded, her exhaustion evident. Sophia was diagnosed with leukemia 2 years ago. She underwent treatment and achieved remission for about a year. Then it came back, more aggressive than before. And she never contacted me? I couldn't keep the hurt from my voice. She considered it, Julie said. But she was stubborn and proud. She didn't want to disrupt your life or make you feel obligated. It wasn't until the end when she knew. Julie glanced at Emma, who was absorbed in her hot chocolate. When she knew she wouldn't recover, that she asked me to find you. How did you know where to bring Emma? Sophia kept track of you, Julie admitted. Not in a stalker way, but she'd see articles about your company. She knew where your headquarters was located. She made me promise that if anything happened to her, I'd bring Emma to you. And you left her there overnight? I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. Julie flinched. I know it seems terrible, but I work night shifts at the hospital. I couldn't take her with me, and I don't have family here to help. I thought if I left her in your office, you'd find her in the morning. The security guard let us in when I said I was delivering important documents to the CEO. I made a mental note to review our security protocols. You could have contacted me directly. Sophia made me promise not to. She wanted you to meet Emma first, to form your own impression without any preconceptions. I shook my head, trying to process this bizarre approach. And now? What was your plan for after I found Emma? Julie looked down at her coffee. Honestly, I'm a nurse with crushing student loan debt. I live in a one-bedroom apartment with a roommate. I would have done my best for Emma because I love Sophia, but... She looked up at me, her eyes filling with tears. She needs her father. She needs stability and security. She's already lost so much. I glanced at Emma, who was carefully tearing her napkin into small pieces, seemingly unaware of the adult conversation happening around her. But kids absorbed more than adults realized. I knew that much from my own childhood. I want to be there for her, I said quietly. I'm her father, but I don't know the first thing about being a parent. Neither did Sophia when Emma was born, Julie said with a small smile. Nobody does. You figure it out as you go. Will you help me? I asked impulsively. Not as a full-time caregiver, but as a bridge. Someone who knows Emma, who knew Sophia. Who can help Emma transition to living with me? Julie's expression softened. I'd like that. For Emma's sake and for Sophia's. As they talked, my eyes kept returning to the bracelet on Emma's wrist. The physical link between past and present, between the love I'd once known and the love I was just beginning to discover. In that moment, I made a silent promise to Sophia and to myself. I would be the father Emma deserved, even if it meant reimagining my entire life. In the aftermath of that fateful morning, my life underwent a transformation that transcended the boundaries of both time and expectation. The little girl, now a beacon of hope and renewal, had ignited within me a desire to heal old wounds and redefine the purpose of my existence. I embraced the journey ahead with a cautious optimism, aware that every answer uncovered might lead to new questions. As I reflected on the intertwining of past and present, I recognized that the unexpected encounter had opened a door to a future filled with infinite possibilities. The bracelet was no longer just a relic of a lost love. It had become a symbol of renewal, a promise that the heart can mend even the deepest scars. I found solace in the thought that destiny often speaks in mysterious ways, inviting us to rewrite our stories. With a newfound commitment to nurturing both personal and professional connections, I set forth on a path defined by compassion, curiosity, and the courage to confront my own vulnerabilities. The encounter had reshaped my perspective on life, teaching me that even in the midst of power and wealth, the most profound truths lie in the unexpected intersections of our past and present. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity and adjustment. My spacious penthouse, once a showcase of modern minimalism, gradually transformed into something warmer, more lived in. Emma's room took shape with purple star-patterned bedding, bookshelves filled with her favorite stories, and walls adorned with her artwork. The formal dining room became her art studio, with easels and paints standing ready for weekend creativity sessions. My executive team had been surprisingly supportive once I'd explained the situation. Melissa, my COO, had stepped up to handle day-to-day operations while I worked remotely 3 days a week. The board had grumbled initially but quieted when preliminary quarterly results showed the company continuing to thrive despite my reduced presence. You have a daughter? Jacob, my VP of marketing, had asked incredulously during our first video conference after Emma's arrival. Yes, I'd replied simply. Her name is Emma. The paternity test had confirmed what I'd already known in my heart. Emma was mine. The legal process of establishing guardianship moved forward smoothly, with Evan handling the details. The landlord in Jamaica Plain had grudgingly allowed us to retrieve Emma's belongings after Evan made a few pointed calls about tenant rights. Today marked a significant milestone. Emma's first day at Brookline Academy, a progressive private school not far from our home. We stood in front of the stately brick building, Emma in her new uniform, navy jumper, white blouse, knee socks, and sensible shoes. Her backpack, covered in colorful pins, looked almost too large for her small frame. "Nervous?" I asked, crouching down to her level. She nodded, clutching the straps of her backpack tightly. "What if nobody likes me?" "Impossible," I said firmly. "You're the most likable person I know." She gave me a skeptical look that was pure Sophia, eyebrows raised, lips pressed together. "You haven't known that many kids, have you?" I laughed, surprised by her insight. "Fair point. But I've known a lot of adults, and trust me, you're way more interesting than most of them." That earned me a small smile. "Progress. Remember, Julie will pick you up after school and take you to the hospital daycare until I finish work. I'll come get you at 6, and we'll have dinner at that Italian place you liked." Emma nodded, her expression serious. In the weeks since she'd come into my life, I'd been amazed by her resilience, her ability to adapt to massive changes while still grieving her mother. There were nights when I heard her crying softly in her room, moments when sadness would overtake her without warning. In those times, I'd hold her and let her cry, resisting the urge to tell her everything would be okay, because how could I promise that? Instead, I'd tell her stories about Sophia in college, filling in the missing pieces of her mother's history. "Ready?" I asked, offering my hand. She took a deep breath, squared her small shoulders, and nodded. "Ready." We walked together through the grand entrance. The principal, Dr. Winters, greeted us personally, one of the perks of a substantial donation to the school's science program. She led Emma to her classroom, promising to check in later. "Goodbye, Mr. Thornton," Emma said formally, still not comfortable calling me Dad, but no longer using just my last name. "Have a great day, Emma. I'll see you tonight." I watched as she disappeared into the classroom, her dark hair bouncing with each step. Then I turned and headed back to my car, where my driver waited to take me to the office. The day passed in a series of meetings and conference calls, but my thoughts kept returning to Emma. Was she making friends? Did she like her teacher? Was she thinking about Sophia, missing her old school, her old life? At 5:30, I left the office, another new habit that had raised eyebrows initially, but was now accepted as part of the restructured work schedule I'd implemented. The hospital daycare was bright and cheerful, staffed by nurses and aides who knew Julie and, by extension, had known Sophia. Emma was sitting at a small table, focused intently on a book about sea creatures. She looked up when I entered, her face lighting up in a way that made my heart swell. "Michael, I made a friend named Lily, and we both like turtles, and the teacher says I'm a good reader, and we're going to have a class pet, and it might be a hamster or a fish, and I hope it's a hamster because you can hold them, but you can't hold fish." She continued her breathless recitation of her day all the way to the restaurant, where we settled into a corner booth. The owner, Giovanni, greeted us warmly. We'd become regulars in recent weeks, Emma drawn to the homemade pasta and tiramisu. "So it was a good day?" I asked when she finally paused for breath. "The best," she confirmed, then hesitated. "Well, not the best, but good." I understood the qualification. The best days had been with Sophia in their old life. This was a new chapter, one we were writing together, page by page. After dinner, we walked along the Charles River, enjoying the mild spring evening. Emma skipped ahead, stopping to examine interesting rocks or watch ducks paddling in the water. She wore a light jacket I'd bought her, and beneath it, the silver bracelet gleamed at her wrist. "Michael," she called, waving me over to where she stood at the water's edge. "Look at this." I joined her, curious about what had captured her attention. She pointed to a small plastic bottle floating near the shore, a piece of paper visible inside. "It's a message in a bottle," she said excitedly. "Like in my book." I reached down and fished it out of the water, unscrewing the cap to extract the damp note inside. Written in childish handwriting were the words, "If you find this, make a wish and throw a penny in the river. Your wish will come true." "Can we do it?" Emma asked, her eyes wide. "Make a wish?" I searched my pocket and found a penny. "Sure, you go first." She closed her eyes tightly, her face scrunched in concentration, then took the penny and tossed it into the water with a small splash. "Your turn," she said, handing me another penny I'd found. I hesitated. It had been years since I'd done something as whimsical as making a wish. But looking at Emma's expectant face, I closed my eyes and thought, I wish for the wisdom to be the father she deserves. The penny arced through the air, landing with a satisfying plunk in the dark water. "What did you wish for?" Emma asked. "I can't tell you, or it won't come true," I said, recalling the childhood rule. She nodded solemnly. "I won't tell mine either. But it was a good one." As we continued our walk, Emma slipped her small hand into mine, a gesture that was becoming more frequent as she grew comfortable with me. The simple touch filled me with a joy I'd never experienced in all my years of business success. Later that night, after reading 3 chapters of Charlotte's Web and tucking Emma into bed, I sat in my home office, looking through the photos of Sophia I'd unearthed from storage. College Sophia, laughing at the camera, her arms slung around my shoulders. Sophia at graduation, radiant in her cap and gown. Sophia and me on a camping trip in the White Mountains, dirty and tired but deliriously happy. I selected one, Sophia on the steps of Widener Library, autumn leaves swirling around her, and placed it in a simple silver frame. Tomorrow, I'd give it to Emma for her room, another piece of her mother to hold on to. My phone buzzed with a text from Julie. "How was her first day?" "Great," I replied. She made a friend. "Thanks for everything, Julie." "Sophia would be proud," came the response. "Of both of you." I hoped she was right. I thought of the wish I'd made, the penny now resting somewhere in the riverbed. The path ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges, setbacks, moments of doubt. Emma would grow up, asking more questions about her mother, about why I hadn't been part of her early life. There would be dance recitals and science fairs, teenage rebellions and heartbreaks, 1,000 moments where I'd have to figure out the right thing to say, the right move to make. But for now, for tonight, we were okay. In the quiet apartment, with Emma sleeping peacefully down the hall, I felt a sense of rightness that had eluded me for years. The bracelet that had once symbolized lost love now represented something different: continuity, legacy, the unanticipated ways our past shapes our future. I closed the photo album and turned off the light, pausing at Emma's doorway to listen to her soft, steady breathing. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new discoveries. But we would face them together, bound by more than DNA, more than circumstance, bound by the promise of a shared journey, unexpected but infinitely precious.